Welcome to the Danny Clinkscale Reasonably Irreverent podcast. Insightful and witty commentary, probing interviews, and detours from the beaten path.
Welcome to Arts and Lifestyle Wednesday, presented by Cinematic Visions, and it's time for another compelling and cool edition of Danny and Tim's Music Scene. Every other Wednesday, we get to check in with the longtime Kansas City music writer, longtime for the Kansas City Star, now out in Kansas City Magazine. You can hear him at 90.9 The Bridge, and his great work about music and conversation right here is something I treasure for sure. And we've, as usual, got a varied and interesting look at the world of music today, and I get to dabble in a slight short review of the show that I saw last night as Jason Mraz performed at Starlight Theater. It was a great re-entree to a big venue show for my wife and I, and I'll explain some of the details of that. And we'll talk about some of the shows that are going on this weekend, big shows from ZZ Top, Foo Fighters, Lady A, Garth Brooks, and some of the permutations and complications of that, and the way that we are sort of maneuvering our way or not through the Delta variant right now. And of course, Jason Isbell canceled a show, but that may or may not have had anything to do with COVID-19. I'll also talk about some great podcast options for you with music as the theme, everything from Cheap Trick to local musicians like Mark Lowry, interviewed by Tim Finn for his In Kansas City Behind the Music series, and there's all kinds of different things to talk about. Music videos and their impact, and ZZ Top and the passing of their bass player Dusty Hill as they go on without him. He said he gave them their blessing that they should continue to rock and roll, and they are. So all those things are tied into, well, one big bundle of music, and it comes your way next on Danny and Tim's Music Scene on Arts and Lifestyle Wednesday, presented by Cinematic Visions.
More of Danny's Reasonably Irreverent podcast after this.
Cinematic Visions has been an affordable solution for professional media production in Kansas City since 2003, offering award-winning video production and creation, as well as a wide array of digital and social media management services. From planning, scripting, filming, editing, and post-production, to delivering your product to a watching world, Cinematic Visions will provide professional and affordable services for you and your business with the necessary return on investment to make it all worthwhile. Cinematic Visions' goal is to unlock the power of storytelling through video and a strong online presence for your company. Beyond the numbers, they want to inspire and evoke your clients to feel and act. Let my friends at Cinematic Visions embed your brand where it belongs, in your customers' minds. You can find them online at cinematicvisions.com or with a quick phone call at 816-600-6300. I'm here with Tim Emerson, the owner of Emerson & Company. And Tim, give us an idea of the range of services that you provide from Emerson & Company.
At Emerson & Company, we do credit card processing, payroll services. We do bookkeeping, merchant accounts like point-of-sale systems.
What would you say differentiates you from other companies in the field, and what makes you special?
I think what makes us unique is that we're a small local business making regional decisions on companies. We create a profile for the business and then put it out to our different vendors in a very competitive environment and tailor those needs to the specific business, which usually ends up in a great fit or great result for the company.
And of course, the idea is to save money, right?
Save money, and actually sometimes I'm surprised where actually a solution that may cost a little bit more ultimately does save money, but we're not conditioned to think like that sometimes.
Emerson & Company. Check them out at emerson-co.com or call them at 816-360-9092. We're here once again with Dr. Brad Woodall from Advanced Sports and Family Chiropractic and Acupuncture. Springtime, good weather's finally here. People want to stay active, and it's your job to make sure that they can stay active, and be healthy.
Danny, we see a lot of not just weekend warriors, but people that every day are having that want to get back to activity. Whether you're starting with walking, jogging, or maybe that first 5K of the year, we want to help you out. We specialize in taking care of all ages, from kids all the way to grandmas and grandpas, but absolutely specialize in getting you back to full function and keeping you in great shape.
So in short, how do we go about doing that?
The first thing is to schedule a consultation with one of our doctors and therapists so we can see how you move and how you're supposed to move. Based on our assessment, we can put together a short treatment plan and a set of goals to help you both feel better, function better, and most importantly, stay better for this year and many years to come.
Learn more at asfca.com/Danny. That's asfca.com/Danny. Let's have a brief conversation with David Schmidt from Pro Millennial. David, what differentiates you from other financial organizations?
I would say the passion we have for seeing our clients succeed is probably paramount to what we do here. There's no joy greater than watching a client accumulate wealth. I had a client that I've had for many years was able to buy his dream warehouse. Nothing too extravagant, but we had a savings plan in place and was able to see him fulfill his dreams.
And what else motivates you in this industry?
Well, lately it's been finding out inconsistencies in the marketplace, ferreting out some more than questionable ideas out there that what we're seeing with Bitcoin and a few of these other cryptocurrencies right now. I'm in the opinion where if it's untraceable, it really needs to be regulated in a big way right now.
To get more information and advice from David, visit promillennial.com or call 816-221-7775. That's 816-221-7775. If you'd like to join these and other great sponsors and market your business to a growing and engaged audience, contact us at Danny@DannyKlinkScale.com. Look forward to hearing from you. Welcome back, and it's always a pleasure to visit with Tim Finn, and we do it every other Wednesday. And, of course, you can read his stuff at In Kansas City Magazine and hear him on 90.9 The Bridge, and just check out what he's all about in his Facebook page, too, which is all kinds of fun. We're going to talk about his Behind the Music series and another episode of that, which is really an enlightening one and always fun to talk to area musicians about their backgrounds and such. And, Tim, right now we are in this sort of cauldron of a barrage of shows to sort of kick off the late summer and bring us back to music. And there are all kinds of interesting complications and stories. And, of course, Thursday, the Foo Fighters play at Azura Amphitheater. And there's nothing going on around that one. So that seems just sort of, okay, we're going to do a normal show and everybody can show up and everything is fine. We've already seen a cancellation at that venue by Jason Isbell, who canceled that show but is subsequently playing shows in other areas. And I guess to start off, that will give us an indication that we still have a lot of complications and these acts somewhat don't know exactly what to do as far as their tours are concerned.
Right. I've heard a couple things about the Jason Isbell cancellation. One was that another obligation came up kind of at the last minute or so. He's making a movie. He's going to be in a Martin Scorsese movie. This was a story that was floating out there. I didn't confirm it or deny it. The one with, I guess it's the one with De Niro and Leonardo DiCaprio. And so something for that came up. That was floated. Otherwise, it sounds like maybe he, the other rumor was, well, he doesn't want to come out here because it's like one of the worst places to be if you don't want to get or expose people to, the Delta variant. So that was strange. I haven't heard, anything hard and fast about the explanation for that. But, on the other hand, 75,000 people will be at Arrowhead on Saturday. And Garth is just kind of saying, well, come on, be safe. It's a good idea to be safe, but come out, have a good time. And that's basically licensed to just act like nothing's wrong. So good luck with that. Yeah, the Foo Fighters is Thursday night. And, they, at the Madison Square Garden show, they sort of enforced loosely a vaccine mandate that I heard wasn't really imposed that hard. So people were getting in either without being checked or flashing someone else's vaccine card. So I think it's probably folly to try to do that. I know at Lollapalooza last weekend, supposedly there were pretty strict measures imposed, and some people who were there said, yeah, they had to go through this protocol to get in. No one was wearing masks, but I find it hard to believe that everybody there could have been checked, but boy, they were packed together too. I watched some of it on Hulu, and just watching it going, I'm so glad I'm not there right now. And especially when Limp Bizkit was playing. Like, this might be the last place on earth I'd like to be right now. So, yeah, we'll see what goes on. I'm sort of in retreat because, people close to me have got it with symptoms. People were vaccinated. So, yeah, I'm kind of headed the other way. I've taken 3 or 4 steps back, me and my wife, our family, because it's just time for caution right now.
I'll get into that in just a minute when I talk about the concert we went and saw. Garth Brooks sort of in a statement kind of, I thought there was a little bit of out front, I don't know, courageousness or whatever, considering his fan base. He did try to somewhat forcefully say that it'd be a good idea if you wear a mask, but then again, he sort of backed off and, he can't say for sure that you can because there's no mandate in place. But he probably actually didn't endear himself to some of his fan base with what he said, because he really was kind of advocating for, hey, make sure that, especially if people wear masks, that you're not saying anything to them and trying to protect the people who would do that. But it was kind of a statement that, as you said, sort of wanted to have it both ways.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty right down the middle. He didn't, what he expressed was, this would be the best thing, but you're going to do what you want to do. I mean, I've been to his shows. There's going to be people singing so loudly. I mean, that's the thing. That's how it's spread, right? It's not going to be a safe place. So there it is. There's no way around that. Former president just canceled his 60th birthday bash. Even though there were going to be strict, rules about contending that, because he's like, this isn't the time right now. We'll do it some other day. So, I guess I'd rather be overcautious, but, we'll see what happens. It's spreading in places that are far less populated than a full Arrowhead Stadium. But, people are going to go no matter what.
That is true, and a lot of them are going to go as well to the ZZ Top and Willie Nelson, and George Thorogood, I think, is on the bill too at Azura Amphitheater. And that show is on Sunday, and that leads us to be able to talk about the passing of Dusty Hill, and they've decided that the show goes on and say that Dusty wants us to continue to play with the other 2 founding members of ZZ Top. And it's, I don't think there's anything that can be said except that ZZ Top, through different phases of music, has been an iconic part of this past generation of popular music, and they continue to go out there and be popular and play big shows, and certainly they don't need the money, but they love playing, and I think that's another thing that sort of plays into the joy of talking about music. But Dusty Hill was certainly a very influential part of the American music culture.
Right, and that band, it's hard to pick another band that pivoted the way ZZ Top did in the 80s. If, there was any band you think would have been sort of rendered passe and obsolete and just become a member of the classic rock nation, just going out doing hits from the 70s, it was that band. But they made as good a use of MTV videos as anyone at that time. They changed their music up. They added some keyboards, give it a little bit of a more modern groove, and gave their Texas blues a little bit more of a modern flair, and became among the, most prominent early stars of those videos with the, the women and the furry guitars and the way those guys looking out of place trying to be hip, and they became hip because of the way they looked. It was really brilliant, and kind of, flip of a coin. They didn't really sure how it was going to work, but we're going to do it this way anyway. And it took off. And I've seen them so many times, but the last few times I've seen them, they were opening, so doing shorter sets, and especially I think Dusty Hill broke his hip and needed surgery. He especially was more slow moving. You could tell those guys were getting older, and like we all do, they were getting slower, and so it's just too bad. I haven't really heard the cause of death. they mentioned his hip replacement or something. It didn't sound like this was expected, but he'd been taken off the tour, and like about a week before, and then just kind of out of nowhere he passed. But they were ready for it. They had someone in line to fill his spots, and they'll go forward as they probably should. They will mourn him and respect him the way they want him, the way they should. So it's sad. It's there's going to be more of that. We know that. We talk about passing of legends too frequently, but it never stops.
Right. It does never stop. And, the thing that was kind of cool about them, and you did reference it, is the fact that they created this sort of persona without, never really knew much about them. They do occasional interviews, and they were always charming in their own low-key way. But it was almost like they were able to remain true to themselves and still be kind of campy and somewhat cool. And it was a pretty great trick.
Oh, they didn't sell out or anything. They just took who they were and then took advantage of what the environment, how the environment changed, and they made use of it. They exploited it. They became visual stars because no one looked like them, no one acted like them, and it was such a contrast to later with the metal bands, with the women in the metal bands. Those women in the ZZ Top videos just happened to be around, and they were just kind of like almost like, how'd they get here? What are they doing here with us? But it was super dry and droll, and it was amusing. But then they had really good songs too. So
right.
It was the perfect adjustment, just the perfect pivot to, is this where it's going? We're going to go with it, and here's how we're going to do it.
Mentioned a couple of the issues before, and Tim gets to kick back for a minute here while I talk about my return to a bigger venue show, and that was last night. Jason Isbell show was supposed to be last night as well, but we went to Starlight Theater to see Jason Mraz, and this plays into a couple of things we talked about because my wife has come off a couple of cancer treatments, and she is doing much, much better, as evidenced by the fact we were going to a show, but still very much health compromised. And she was very, very concerned about what we were going to find at Starlight. And what it turned out to be was a perfect evening. The crowd was big, but it wasn't that big. Probably a couple thousand. It was packed down in the first 30 rows or so, but up where we were sitting, we could find seating where there was basically nobody around. And so the weather was fantastic, and I'll get to the show itself in a minute. But so it just kind of everything came together to make us feel safe and have a very enjoyable evening. And just the sight of the beaming smile on my wife's face all night long was enough to make it great. But Starlight is a great venue, and you don't get too many Kansas City nights where it's 75 degrees with low humidity. And when that happens, that is a place to be, isn't it?
Oh, it's the best outdoor venue I'm going to say I've ever been in. I mean, I haven't been to a ton of others, but certainly around here, because there's not a bad seat. It sounds good everywhere. I don't think I've ever been to a show where the sound hasn't been at least, at its worst, just above average. And it just always sounds good there. And I was outside last night, and I knew you were going to the show, and I thought, man, you almost need like a long sleeve shirt or a light sweater tonight to be out there, because there was a little slight bit of a nip in the air, later on. So, I mean, it's perfect when it's like that out there. There's no better place to watch or listen to music or live music.
And the show itself, it's a very interesting. Jason Mraz is a very interesting performer. He was great. It was a great show. He's an unbelievably positive and upbeat person. So he started off with a song that was called "Music Is Back." And then the second song was Remedy, so he jumped right into a big hit. But much of the show was made up of the songs from his new album, which is called Look for the Good, and it's basically a reggae album. It's basically a reggae rap album is what it would be. And there were 13 people on stage, and musicians were good. And he has I don't think, this is the first time I've seen him on live, and he has a musical theater background. In fact, he's performed on Broadway a couple of times, and that became very evident. He's such a natural performer. He's a fine singer, and it did and it was a great show. And he, I leaned over at one point, maybe you like this, to my wife towards the end of the show, and I said, this guy's kind of like the cool Mr. Rogers. I mean, his message is just relentlessly upbeat, and empower yourself and look for the good and do good things for yourself.
Right.
And, maybe it probably wouldn't be everybody's cup of tea. And we eventually wearied of the, fact that it was pretty much a reggae show. And that gets a little old to me. But besides that, it was wonderful. He's a great performer with a perfect message for the times.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen him. He reminds me of Michael Franti, who, you go into a Michael Franti show, whatever mood you're in, you can resist, but you'll end up surrendering anyway to his whole positive. And he goes into the crowd and he's bringing people on stage, and it inflates your mood. You're like, all right, yeah, you know what? Maybe things aren't as bad, and everyone's having a good time. Everyone's treating each other well, and there is hope out there. No matter, I mean, and this is long before kind of world we're in now, and I think messages like his are, people are really thirsty for it, and the time for it is now. It's like the Ted Lasso,
right?
Infatuation is like, I just needed to see something like that.
Absolutely, it was a great show, and it was a great return. And as I said, they're if you're concerned about, you're not going to go to Arrowhead and see Garth Brooks and feel safe, but they're probably at shows at Starlight and things like that. You can probably find a way to feel safe. There were some people who obviously had tickets who took a blanket and sat off to the side. And so you can do things like that, and it's a great way to sort of get your toe back into. And if it's your want to go and go hip to hip with people, I wouldn't recommend that, but that's up to people. So it was a wonderful night for us as we continue to talk about music with Tim Finn. We're going to talk about a local musician that he's profiling and a couple of recommendations for entertainments as well coming up next. It's Danny and Tim's Music Scene as part of Arts and Lifestyle Wednesday, presented by Cinematic Visions, right here on the Reasonably Irreverent Podcast.
More of Danny's Reasonably Irreverent podcast after this.
We're here with Michael Barber, the CEO and founder of Microlight Corporation of America, the world leaders in laser therapy. And Michael, tell us a little bit about your product.
Our device is using a particular wavelength and power to reduce pain and swelling. My background is surgical lasers, but I've been involved with this particular device now for about the last 20 years, actually.
And I know that it works because I've had it used on me as well. And tell us about the relationship you have with your company and Canaway.
It's what I call a strategic business relationship, in that Canaway, the leader in the field of the cannabinoid systems and CBD oil, but our device used in conjunction with Canaway CBD oil gives a better pain relief outcome for the patient.
And if you want to get that pain relief outcome like I did, you can reach their local representative, Sherry McCants, at 515-208-6312. That's 515-208-6312.
Hey everyone, this is Matt Llewellyn for the 23rd Street Brewery. Thank you so much for supporting local restaurants, especially through this pandemic. And you know what? We're almost through it. At the 23rd Street Brewery, we have brought in a few more tables. You can wear a mask if you want, or not. It's your choice. Other than that, we're open 11:30 every single day. So come see us at the 23rd Street Brewery in Lawrence.
Hey everybody, Joe Spiker, owner of Easton Roofing here. For almost 10 years, we've been a locally owned and operated family business. At Easton, we work on every job with one thing in mind: integrity matters. I grew up in Central Kansas, was raised on the values of respecting hard work. We run our company every day on that value set. At Easton, we always make decisions based on the ethical, right thing for the customer. That's what integrity means to us. So if you have any questions about your roof, give me and my team a call, 913-257-5426, Easton Roofing. Integrity matters.
Time to spend a few minutes with my good friend Jeff Dillon from Dillon's Heating and Cooling. And Jeff, what differentiates your company from others in the industry?
Plain and simple, we're honest. We have integrity, and we're going to do things right the first time. There's way too many companies out there that lie, cheat, hide things from the homeowner or customer, and we're not about that. It's kind of funny sometimes. I actually am so honest with some people, it kind of surprises them. But sometimes it's good for business, sometimes it's bad for business. But ultimately, it's the kind of business that I want to run, is an honest one.
And that family way of treating things is part of your slogan, and it's also part of one of your great features that you offer to customers.
Our slogan is like family. Our most popular maintenance plan is called the Family Plan. It's very similar to a lot of ones out there. The little tweak that we do to ours, 1% off for every 2 years. They have a continued maintenance plan with us. If they have a maintenance plan for 10 years, then we give them 5% off, no questions asked.
You can find out more about Dillon's Heating and Cooling and all their great range of services at dillonsheatingandcooling.com. That's Dillon's with an S. The phone number, 913-214-1343.
If you'd like to join these and other great sponsors and market your business to a growing and engaged audience, contact us at danny@dannyclinkscale.com. Look forward to hearing from you.
We're back with Tim and talking about music, and you obviously write stuff and probably will start doing a bit more of it because we got so many shows coming up for In Kansas City Magazine. It's a great publication, and a regular series you do is Behind the Music, and it's always great to get to know some people in the local music scene who people are familiar with, but you get to know them better through your interviewing, which is always keen and on point. And Mark Lowry, a great local piano player, has played around town for upwards of 20 years now, is the subject of the latest one, and it's really revealing and fun.
Yeah, I was thinking, I think when I met Mark, it was back, first met him and first talked to him when he was really emerging as, this young guy in the jazz community and was playing out at, Phoenix and places like that. Jardines was a place for him too. And, but I was just thinking, wow, that he was like in his mid-20s back then, because I think if he didn't just turn 40, he did last year. So he's been doing it at least that long. At least, we're talking about 15 or 16 years. And he sort of epitomizes where the jazz scene in Kansas City is right now, which is, there's the old vanguard. They're the guys out there doing kind of the standards and following the traditional route. And then there's the next or younger generation of people like Mark who grew up, their foundation is in rock and roll, is in rock music, is in, popular music, independent music, FM radio music. And that makes its way into their live performances. And even since he started, it's evolved into a lot of the guys are incorporating hip-hop into their, not into just into their music, but into their live performances, where there's an MC, but it's jazz, but it's hip hop. It's this fusion of all that R&B and soul and jazz. It's really, really great stuff, and it's drawing a younger crowd. You've seen it at places like Green Lady Lounge. Still a lot of thirst for that. So he was sort of on the front of that. I know he would, Radiohead was a band he really liked. He was working that into his repertoire. He took part in a couple of, one-off projects. One was this project Beck did, where he just released sheet music for an album. He didn't record the album himself, and he just let, here, you guys do something with it. And a bunch of Kansas City musicians did, and it was awesome. It was great. So he's really eager and willing to participate in stuff like that. He did a Radiohead tribute too, I think, it was part of that. So really, he just loves all kinds of music. I mean, I think it was interesting in my interview, he said one of the bands he's like starting to explore more is Wings, Paul McCartney and Wings, which I never would have come up with as someone who might interest him, but, I'm sure, maybe I don't give McCartney as much credit as I do, even though I give him a ton. It's like, he's inspired a lot of people for a lot of reasons, and his music is a little more sophisticated than I give it credit for. So that's kind of where Mark is from. He's just a really still a student of music, and he's still an explorer of all kinds of music, and it shows. He's a really, really lively, engaging, warm live performer, and he kept the pandemic going for him by just doing shows 3 or 4 nights a week from his apartment, and a lot of people tuned into that because he'd become a regular part of their music lives.
And it is a great interview. You can catch that at In Kansas City Magazine. The online version is what I'm looking at right now on my screen, and it's a great interview, as they always all are. Let's talk about a podcast interview. I never mind promoting other podcasts, and one of the really great ones is Broken Record, Rick Rubin's podcast, and he often enlists other people to be the host of it. And you heard one recently with, I think, a musician that maybe we didn't think would stand the test of time when they first came out, Cheap Trick's Rick Nielsen.
Yeah, so the Broken Record was co-founded by Rick Rubin, Malcolm Gladwell, and this guy,
Right.
Bruce Headlam, who's an editor at the New York Times, and I had to explore his background, and it's just an incredible journalist. He's been involved in a lot of things that have nothing to do with music, but has been part of Pulitzer Prize projects, and he's a really interesting guy. And he knows music, and this interview was just notable because I had minimal exposure to Rick Nielsen's personality other than on stage, but he's a storyteller. He's from Rockford, Illinois. He's got the Chicago thing going. He's kind of cantankerous and kind of sounds like Mike Royko, but he's just dropping these stories. His father was like a preacher, so there was church music was involved in his life, but his father ran a music store, which is where Rick's love of guitar started. He owned like 600 guitars. But he was talking like one of his customers he remembers was Jimmy Page, like right after he'd left the Yardbirds. And then another of his customers was Sam Kinison, the comedian, rest in peace,
Right.
who was still like this evangelical, tent revival preacher and needed some sound equipment for his religious show. And he just goes on, just like sort of parading through, stopping to drop these anecdotes and, stories. And really interesting. It's only like 35 minutes, but it's just packed with these funny one-liners and stories. And what I had no idea of was towards the end, he's talking about George Martin in 1980 produced Cheap Trick record, which I had stopped buying them, by then, I think.
Right.
But then he talked about that experience and how much they absorbed from George Martin and how he imparted some of his Beatles tricks onto that record. And that same year, just like weeks later, he helped out with John Lennon's Double Fantasy record. And he was a little vague about this or ambiguous, but I don't think what he performed made the record, but he sort of showed the guitar players why John Lennon brought him in. He wanted something a little harder and more untamed in the guitars on that record, probably the Yoko numbers. But so Rick was brought in to sort of influence that. But it was a really he was kind of like, yeah, I did that. But it was really fascinating that he was really close with the Beatles. He became, he was a fan and then became sort of a colleague and a peer of theirs.
Did he talk at all about how he developed his stage persona, which is unusual to say the least?
He did. He sort of like we inadvertently sort of accidentally became. Look at me. I'm not Robin Zander.
Right.
I can't be that guy. So me and Bunny had to be the two goofy guys. So and it just sort of organically, became that. I always thought he was like John Cleese dressed up to be a rock star every time I saw him, from Monty Python. And he's funny on stage, but that was like, it wasn't scripted. He just sort of exaggerated who he was, the way he dressed, and because you're on stage, you got to play and perform for the people in the back. So, he emphasized it, but it was like the perfect chemistry of that band. You got two dreamboat guys and two goofballs, kind of how he put it, and the only thing they didn't talk about, I'm sure it was off limits, is the whole Bunny Carlos thing. That was really kind of sad and tragic that a band couldn't stay together, and it got kind of bitter. But even Tom Petty fired a drummer, so it
Right.
happens.
It does indeed, and we'll wrap it up with just a little recommendation. This is kind of a goofy one to say the least, but I sort of kick around looking at stuff, and Rolling Stone has put out their top 100 videos of all time, music videos, and Beyonce's Formation wins the top prize, but the Buggles video Killed the Radio Star is the number 100. So if that's the type, a list is the type of thing that you look at, and we talked about videos a little bit earlier in our segment, and the Buggles video is the very first one that went on MTV, and we talked about ZZ Top and things like that. That was such a moment in time. I mean, every band still makes videos, but for about 5 years, it was the most important, maybe a little bit longer than that. It was the most important thing in the music business.
Oh, definitely. I watched a Peter Gabriel documentary, and we talked about the Sledgehammer video, which she said really was pivotal in that record taking off. But, this was in 1986. That was, how long ago? 35 years ago. But they didn't have the digital capabilities that we do now, obviously. So all that stuff was done by hand, it was like claymation stuff, and how painstaking it was. But by the time it was finished and people saw it for the first time, it just blew everyone's mind. Now it looks a little primitive and quaint, but it was like, we needed this, and we had this wild idea. We knew it was going to take weeks to complete, and but it was worth it, and it definitely gave that album, a lot of momentum. It ended up having, we talked about that record, the So album. There were songs on the radio that were 5 minutes long, but it was that popular, and the video had a lot to do with it.
No question about that. So if you can go over to Rolling Stone, you can check out that top 100 list. And those are the kind of things that wiled away the time when we had more time. And let's hope we don't start having more time. And Tim, you mentioned you took a step or two back, and I think everybody probably should be doing that a little bit. It's a shame, but we're headed back to less good weather. And it is going to be difficult, Tim, to wrap things up, because people have now been given their taste of freedom, and reining them back in is going to be a difficult thing.
Yes, it's already that way. People are defiant, and I'm not doing even the mask wearing. Like, that's some burden. I don't get it, but yeah, it's I think pick every cliche you want. The horses are out of the barn, and we're not going to get them all back in. So, and we are headed towards colder weather and more indoor activity. I hope it's not as grim as I'm afraid it might be, and maybe it won't be. More people are getting vaccinated, which is a huge start. So that's right now going to be our savior. It's just everyone, as many people as possible, get the vaccine.
Tim, always a pleasure, and we'll talk to you again in a couple of weeks.
Sounds good. Thanks, Danny.
We hope you enjoyed the latest Danny Klingscale Reasonably Irreverent podcast. Come back soon for something fresh and new. This podcast was made possible by our great sponsors like
Cinematic Visions, an affordable and award-winning solution for professional media production since 2003.